Welcome back to Strictly Money. Are higher interest rates and the higher cost of goods making you worried about your cash savings and debt load? You would not be alone if you are. In fact, credit counselors across the country have seen a notable increase in calls from people financially stressed. And some economists are now warning that the situation will only get worse. To discuss this and more is Stacy Yanchuk Oleksy. She's the CEO of Counselling Canada, and she joins me now. Hi, Stacy. Great to have you on.
Hi, Saijal. It's great to be on.
You know, Stacy, the last time you were on, which was actually September, we discussed how high inflation was impacting Canadians then. And it's still here. In fact, it's higher. Plus, we're now grappling with higher interest rates. So give us a sense of what you're seeing today.
That's exactly what we're seeing. You know, our clients are everyday consumers like you and I. And so, I think we're all feeling this pinch. And what we're feeling the pinch on is, of course, groceries. Every time we have to go get groceries, it just gets a little more expensive. And then, filling up at the pump, my goodness, you almost need Tums just to settle down the heartburn when you fill up with gas. Plus, what we've got pressure on housing. Housing is more expensive and it's harder to find. As well. We're also getting pressure to reintegrate back into like in-person living, right? Back into the workplace, back to kids' sports activities. So that also increases our family budget and puts more pressure on. So we have a lot of folks that are stressed.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you said people like you and I, right? So I was actually wondering, what does the composition of those people calling in look like? Are you seeing people that wouldn't have called a year or two ago, right? There's people who, live paycheck to paycheck, but are you seeing people who are calling in and saying, I'm just worried, like I have savings, but I'm worried it's getting depleted or I may have to go into debt? What are you seeing?
Absolutely. This is impacting everybody. Now, unless you're, that top 10% that's doing just fine and doesn't have to worry about money, right? This is putting pressure on everyone. So you're seeing everyday people who didn't even know what credit counseling was are giving us a call. People are calling us back, and which is good, right? We want them to call, but they're stressed. And that's what's really going on is there's just a lot of pressure on Canadian families to make ends meet.
What are their top issues?
You know what we did? We commissioned a survey with Angus Reid last year, so it's recent results. And what we found is 40% of respondents actually found that their primary concern of, housing and inflationary costs was impacting their financial health and well-being. And then we found also that 40% of respondents their mental health was being negatively impacted by their finances. So it's not just having an impact on our wallets, right, or our debt loads. It's actually having an impact on our mind, our hearts, our souls, our families, and then the workplace too, right? This all has cost. If my depression gets worse because of my debt, then I'm not too productive at work when I'm Googling trying to figure out how to get help, right? So I'm less productive. So that impacts my workplace as well.
Yeah,
so it has far-reaching impact.
I'm so glad you raised that point because sometimes people don't realize the snowball effect. And we know that actually money is one of the top sources of stress, and it does have an impact physically and emotionally on you. So where does someone start if they feel financially stressed? What's the first thing they need to do?
The first thing they need to do always is breathe, right? When we are nervous, anxious, or, stressed, we start to pant like dogs, pant in our throats and we can't breathe properly. So take big, deep breaths because that's important. And as you take a deep breath, remember that your net worth, how much you're worth financially, has nothing to do with how much you are worth as a person. So self-worth and net worth are different. But what we've done, Saijal, is we've put them together, right? So if I have money problems, that must make me a bad person. I should be ashamed of myself. No, lots of people have money problems, right? We're not taught how to do this. So let's separate that out.
Yeah.
The next step, and I got to be honest, it's so boring, is track your expenses. I mean, everybody, it's easier to spend the money than to write it down, but the writing it down actually holds us accountable. I remember I taught a workshop and I had a woman that took me up on a tracking challenge, and she saved $200 by doing it, right? Because it just holds you a little more accountable to it.
Yeah, I know a lot of people don't like doing budgets, but it is really important.
Oh yeah, they're boring. Right? They're not very sexy. They're boring. But what they can allow us, if we get that stuff right, is they allow us to have that life that we want, that exciting, whatever, sexy life. But let's get with the basics. Track your expenses. Actually find out where your money's going. Learn the truth.
Yeah. No, I always say budget because it actually gives you the awareness. You can't fix what you don't
Yes,
see, right? Okay, we're going to take a
absolutely.
quick commercial break, but we'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back. I'm Stacy. Before the break, we were talking about budgeting. For those who are living paycheck to paycheck, it feels like you can't cut expenses, right? And I really do understand that. Is there advice for them? Like, is there still some opportunity that they can just kind of look at how they're spending and tweak it?
Absolutely. And you know what? I understand living paycheck to paycheck, but here, let's go back to tracking our expenses. So tracking our expenses is only the action of writing down, in whichever way you want, what you spent, right? It's not about cutting anything at this point. So it's really, you're being curious, right? You're investigating, you're being Columbo on your finances. And all you're doing is looking at what's going on, because then you can start to see patterns, right? Like, I noticed that we have 2 streaming services. Maybe we just need one.
Yeah.
And that's where, perhaps as an individual or as a couple or family, you can make some decisions about, okay, here's where it's at. And then when it comes to, dealing with emergency issues, sometimes we just have to cut back temporarily, right? We're going to cut, I'm making an example. I'm going to cut cable temporarily, for the next 2 months or over summer, because I don't watch TV over the summer. And then I'll look back at it, but I'm going to take that savings and move it over to either savings or debt, whatever my priority is.
Yeah.
Right. So the tracking of the Saijal is actually not about cutting. It's just about being aware, because then that information, as you said, it's power, and it gives you some choices on what to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're seeing people when they're looking at food right now, because food costs are, through the roof. They're like, you know what, I'm going to cut back on meat temporarily, or I'm going to just buy bulk or no-name brands or things like that. So, you do have a little bit of room. Talk to me, Stacy, about apps, because I have to think there are some apps that help with budgeting and saving.
Absolutely. You know what? Technology, most of us have, cell phones in our hands or pockets, right? We've got a whole supercomputer in our hands. So why not leverage that? Look online for some free apps and savings apps, right? Some where you can do cross comparison and you can, which helps you get information. Sometimes you can actually circle some savings, off of flyers and actually, get the coupons. Others, you can get rebates. So it's worth doing the work, right? It's kind of like getting the coupons. Doing that little bit of extra work can actually save you some money. And why not?
Yeah.
And if you have kids, it's a great opportunity, right? If you don't want to do the work, get them to do the work. Get them to go hunt for sales, right? Why not?
How does one create a strategy to cut debt? That's a big one.
Sure. Yes. So again, first, let's breathe, let's find, and then what we need to do is take stock, right? Take stock of where it's at. And this is the hardest part when it comes to debt management, is actually just writing everything down on what your situation is, right? Because then that can feel overwhelming and like you're drowning. But take stock as to what is your income? What do you own? What do you owe? So how much money do you owe and who do you owe it to? And then once you have that picture, then what you can do is create a strategy, right? That could be a snowball strategy or an avalanche strategy. Snowball is where you start with one small debt. You make minimum payments on everything else, but you start with one small debt and you pay it off. And then that gives you some success. So then you take that money and you put it to the next one, and it snowballs, right? It gets bigger and bigger. Oh, I'm sorry. It gets bigger and bigger. Right? You could do the opposite, where you could take the biggest debt first, the avalanche, and pay that one off, and then pay the other ones off. Right? There are lots of ways.
There's lots
Sometimes
of ways.
There are. You could sell stuff if you want, right? You could look at your own financing and go to a bank. There's lots of options, to deal with debt. But what we encourage people to do is, if you're wondering what to do, get help, right? Seek help from a professional, because there's lots of options out there and they're not all good.
Right. And I only have 40 seconds left. And that was my question, is when should someone seek credit counseling? And if they come to you, what services do you provide?
Absolutely. Anybody can come and see a nonprofit credit counselor. It's free, it's highly confidential, and people are available, 6 days a week to help. So what credit counselors can do is provide a listening ear and compassion. That's the first thing. I think that's really important, and non-judgment. Then what they can do is look at the financial situation and give options, right? When we have options, we have opportunities. Then they can also give resources, they can create a budget for them, and they can help manage their debt. So
Okay.
if somebody has debt, right, to me, the first sign of trouble is
Yeah.
if you can't sleep at night, next morning, call the nonprofit credit counselor.
Okay.
Get in and see someone.
Stacy, we appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on today.
Always my pleasure, Saijal. Have a great day.
You too. Well, that wraps up this edition of Strictly Money. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.